The streetlight casts a yellow circle on the windshield, illuminating his hands as they rest on the steering wheel. Al Pacino sits in his car across from the house where he lived 30 years ago, engine off, watching shadows move behind curtains that aren't his anymore. The family inside doesn't know they're being observed by a man who used to call this place home, who used to have keys to that front door, who used to belong in those lit windows. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like it. It's past midnight on a Tuesday. The neighborhood sleeps around him, porch lights glowing softly, cars parked in driveways beside houses full of people living ordinary lives. But Al Pacino can't sleep, hasn't been sleeping well for months, so he drives the empty streets until he finds himself here, outside the colonial-style house on Maple Avenue where he lived from 1982 to 1995 with a woman who loved him before the world made loving him complicated. The house looks smaller than he remembers, though that might be the perspective of sitting low in the car seat rather than standing at the front door. The new owners have painted it a different shade of blue, installed shutters he never liked, replaced the old oak tree in the front yard with something more decorative. But the bones of the place remain the same. The windows positioned exactly where he remembers them. The porch still wide enough for 2 chairs and morning coffee. A light moves through the kitchen, visible through the window above the sink. Someone getting water? Maybe, or checking that the stove is off before bed. Simple domestic rituals that he used to perform in that same space. Padding around in bare feet at midnight, sometimes unable to sleep after a long day of filming, sometimes coming home late from dinners that ran longer than expected. He remembers standing at that kitchen window, looking out at the yard where Sarah planted tomatoes every spring. She would work in the garden while he learned lines on the back deck, their separate activities creating a comfortable parallel existence. He would watch her through the glass, hands dirty with soil, completely absorbed in the simple task of growing something. The sight of her kneeling among the plants always calmed him in ways he couldn't articulate. The light in the kitchen goes out. Whoever lives there now has finished their midnight ritual and returned to bed, to a spouse who probably doesn't worry about paparazzi or premiere schedules or the careful management of public image. They can move through their house without thinking about who might be watching, can have arguments without wondering if someone is listening, can simply exist in their domestic space without it becoming performance. Al Pacino shifts in the driver's seat, trying to get comfortable without starting the engine. The car is expensive, German, with leather seats that adjust in 17 different directions. But sitting here watching his former life, it feels like a prison. The windows are tinted dark enough to hide him from recognition, the interior isolated from the world outside. He can observe but not participate, can remember but not return. A dog barks somewhere down the street, probably responding to his unfamiliar car parked where cars don't usually park at this hour. But the sound fades quickly, and the neighborhood settles back into its peaceful rhythm. These people don't live on guard against intrusion or unexpected attention. Their midnight disturbances come from normal sources, domestic sounds, familiar disruptions. Through the living room window, he can see the outline of furniture arranged around television. Not the same furniture he and Sarah chose together, but serving the same purposes. A couch facing the screen, a coffee table stacked with magazines, lamps positioned for reading. The new family has made the space their own, while maintaining its essential function as a place where people gather at the end of the day to simply be together. He used to sit on a different couch in that same room, Sarah curled against his side, while they watched movies he'd already seen or television shows that meant nothing to him except that she enjoyed them. Sometimes she would fall asleep during the second hour, and he would stay still so as not to wake her, watching her breathe in the flickering light from the screen. Those moments felt more real than anything he'd ever performed on camera. The memory sits heavy in his chest as he watches the empty windows. Sarah left him not because of another woman or money problems or any of the dramatic reasons that end relationships in movies. She left because being with Al Pacino required her to live as an appendage to his public image rather than as herself. Every restaurant became a potential photo opportunity. Every vacation required security arrangements. Every argument had to be conducted in whispers in case someone was listening. The end came gradually, then suddenly. Years of small compromises and careful behavior, and living in the margins of his fame, until one morning she woke up and didn't recognize her own life anymore. She wanted children, but Al Pacino's children would never be just children. They would be celebrity offspring, their childhood documented and analyzed and turned into content for other people's consumption. She wanted normal family dinners, but Al Pacino's dinner table would always be a set where perfect family life was performed for an invisible audience. She moved out on a Thursday in March while he was filming in Los Angeles. He came home to empty closets and a note explaining that she couldn't live as a supporting character in his story anymore. The house felt enormous without her, every room echoing with the absence of ordinary domestic life. He sold it 6 months later, unable to inhabit a space designed for two people when he'd become someone who could only be alone. But now, sitting outside the house in the darkness, he can see what it became without him. The warm glow from the windows suggests contentment, normalcy, the kind of domestic peace that eluded him even when he lived there. The new family has filled the space with their own routines, their own love, their own version of ordinary happiness. They probably argue sometimes, worry about money, deal with the small crises that fill normal lives. But they can do all of this privately, without consideration for how their personal struggles might affect public image or career trajectory. A car turns the corner, headlights sweeping across his windshield before disappearing down the street. The driver probably notices his vehicle, but doesn't slow down or investigate. In this neighborhood, people respect each other's privacy, assume everyone has a legitimate reason for being where they are. They don't live with the constant awareness that their movements might be scrutinized or their presence might be newsworthy. The front porch light comes on, motion activated, probably triggered by a cat or raccoon moving through the yard. For a moment, the entrance is illuminated exactly as it used to be when he would arrive home late from work. Sarah would leave the porch light on for him, a simple gesture that meant someone was waiting, someone cared whether he made it home safely. The light would guide him from the car to the front door, from the public world, where he was Al Pacino, to the private space where he could just be himself. But the light is automated now, triggered by sensors rather than human consideration. It glows for 30 seconds, then shuts off, leaving the porch in darkness again. No one is waiting inside for him to come home. No one is concerned about his safety or wondering why he's late. The house has moved on to shelter new lives, new love, new versions of domestic happiness that don't require the careful choreography his presence always demanded. He thinks about the family sleeping inside, probably unaware that someone is watching their house at midnight. A husband and wife, maybe sharing a bed where he and Sarah used to lie awake talking about their days, their plans, their fears about the future. Children in bedrooms where he used to store his scripts and awards and the accumulated debris of a career that consumed more and more space as it grew larger and more demanding. When he lived here, the house gradually transformed around his needs. The dining room became a meeting space where his agent and publicist would spread contracts across the table Sarah had chosen for family dinners that never happened. The guest bedroom, filled with scripts and promotional materials, and the endless paperwork that comes with being a valuable commercial property. Even the garage was eventually converted to storage for the costumes and props he brought home from various films, artifacts of characters he played taking up space meant for cars and bicycles, and the normal accumulation of family life. Sarah tried to maintain pockets of normalcy, but Al Pacino's life expanded to fill whatever space was available. Phone calls about business interrupted their conversations. Security concerns limited their social life. The simple act of ordering pizza required consideration of delivery drivers who might recognize him and sell the information to tabloids. Every domestic moment became filtered through the lens of public relations and image management. The kitchen light comes on again. Someone else awake, maybe a parent responding to a child's nightmare or a spouse unable to sleep. Through the window, he could see a figure moving around, opening the refrigerator, perhaps making tea or warming milk. Ordinary middle-of-the-night parenting, the kind of domestic routine he never learned because his life became too complicated for such simple responsibilities. Sarah wanted children, but he was afraid of what his fame would do to them. Afraid of photographers following them to school, other friends' parents wanting something from them, other childhood being commodified and consumed by people who cared nothing about their actual well-being. He chose to protect hypothetical children by never having them. But in the process, he protected himself from the vulnerability and joy that comes with normal family life. The figure in the kitchen disappears, and the light goes out again. But Al Pacino continues watching, imagining the life that happens behind those walls. Morning routines around a breakfast table where kids complain about homework and parents drink coffee while reading news that doesn't include stories about them. Evening dinners where the biggest drama involves who forgot to feed the dog or whether someone can stay up late to finish a school project. He remembers the last normal dinner he and Sarah shared in that kitchen. She had made pasta with the tomatoes from her garden, and they talked about taking a vacation somewhere warm, maybe the Caribbean or Mexico. But even that simple conversation became complicated when he mentioned the need to check with his publicist about international travel, about which resorts had adequate security, about whether paparazzi were currently active in whatever location they chose. Sarah's face changed during that conversation, a small shift that he almost missed, but that marked the beginning of the end. She looked at him as if seeing a stranger, someone who couldn't discuss vacation plans without considering media coverage and security protocols. The man she fell in love with had become Al Pacino so completely that he couldn't separate his personal desires from his professional obligations. The house across the street holds its secrets quietly. Whatever arguments happen inside, whatever moments of joy or frustration or ordinary human complexity, they remain private. The new family can love each other without their relationship being analyzed by strangers, can have bad days without them becoming news, can simply exist without every moment being potential content for someone else's consumption. Al Pacino checks the clock on the dashboard. Nearly 1 in the morning. He's been sitting here for almost 2 hours, watching strangers live in the space where he once tried to build something permanent. But the watching doesn't bring back the feeling of belonging there, doesn't restore the sense of home he lost when Sarah left. It only emphasizes the distance between who he was then and who he became, between the life he had and the life he chose. A police car turns onto the street, moving slowly, probably on routine patrol. Al Pacino straightens in his seat, considers starting the engine, and driving away before the officer notices a car parked in an unusual location at an unusual hour. But the patrol car passes without slowing, the officer probably assuming anyone in this neighborhood at this time belongs. Another small privilege of living normally, being given the benefit of the doubt, rather than being viewed as a potential security risk or publicity problem. He settles back in his seat and continues watching. The house remains quiet, its occupants secure in their ordinariness, protected by anonymity from the kind of scrutiny that makes privacy impossible. They can have bad days without them being reported, can make mistakes without them becoming news, can love each other without their relationship being analyzed and commodified by strangers. The moon moves behind clouds, and the street grows darker. But the darkness doesn't hide the warmth that radiates from the houses around him. Porch lights left on for teenagers coming home late. Kitchen windows glowing where someone can't sleep. The occasional flicker of a television where a parent checks on a sick child. Normal domestic life continuing its quiet rhythms, unmarked and unobserved except by him. A bedroom window glows softly with the blue light of a phone screen. Someone checking the time, maybe, or reading messages, or unable to sleep for reasons that have nothing to do with fame or public obligation. Just human insomnia, private worry, the ordinary restlessness that comes with being alive and conscious in the middle of the night. Their concerns are their own, unobserved and unanalyzed, allowed to remain private. Al Pacino remembers lying awake in that same bedroom. Sarah sleeping beside him while he worried about upcoming films, difficult directors, the constant pressure to maintain his reputation and continue choosing roles that would enhance rather than diminish his legacy. Even in the most private moments, his mind was occupied with public concerns, the machinery of his career grinding away even during sleep. But Sarah's concerns were different, more immediate and human. The garden that needed attention, the book she was reading, plans for weekend trips to places where they might not be recognized. She lived in real time while he lived in the carefully managed future of his public image. Eventually, the disconnect became too great, the distance too painful, and she chose ordinary life with someone else over extraordinary life as his appendage. The phone light disappears from the bedroom window. Whoever was awake has settled back into sleep, their midnight worry resolved, or at least postponed until morning. The house returns to complete darkness, full of people who can rest peacefully because their lives belong to them rather than to an audience that demands constant performance and perfect behavior. Al Pacino thinks about Sarah now, wherever she is, probably married to someone whose name appears nowhere in public records, whose face means nothing to strangers, whose love doesn't require security clearance or media management. She got what she wanted, the kind of ordinary happiness that fame makes impossible. She can argue with her husband in restaurants without worrying about eavesdroppers, can take family vacations without considering paparazzi, can raise children who will be allowed to be children rather than celebrity offspring. He doesn't resent her choice. How could he? She chose life over performance, authenticity over image, love over legacy. She chose to be happy rather than famous, and the wisdom of that choice becomes clearer with every year that passes. The man who lives with her now probably comes home from work without being followed, probably takes her to dinner without reservations requiring special arrangements, probably loves her without their relationship becoming content for public consumption. The neighborhood around him sleeps peacefully, full of people who can love without their emotions being scrutinized, can fight without their conflicts being reported, can simply exist without every moment requiring careful consideration of how it might appear to strangers. Their lives belong to them in ways his life never can, never could, not since he became Al Pacino instead of just being himself. A delivery truck rumbles past, probably bringing newspapers or bread or some other necessity of ordinary morning routine. The driver doesn't notice the expensive car parked in an unusual location, or if he does, he doesn't care. His concerns are practical, immediate, focused on completing his route and getting home to his own version of normal life. He exists in a world where people's presence or absence doesn't require explanation or justification to strangers. Al Pacino sits in his car, watching the dark windows and remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere, to share an ordinary domestic life with someone who loved him for who he was, not what he represented. The memories bring no comfort, only clarity about what he lost and the impossibility of getting it back. The house across the street holds everything he gave up for fame: shared mornings, private arguments, children allowed to be ordinary. A normal life, protected by anonymity and made precious by privacy. He reaches for the key, then stops. Starting the engine would end this quiet vigil and return him to his real life, his empty apartment, his carefully managed existence. Sitting here a little longer, he can pretend he's just another man remembering a love that was real while it lasted. It's nearly 3 in the morning. The neighborhood sleeps, but Al Pacino stays awake, finally understanding what he traded for fame, and whether it was worth it. When he starts the engine, the sound feels too loud. He pulls away slowly, watching the house disappear in the mirror, taking with it the last connection to a time when he was simply a man in love. The drive home passes empty streets and sleeping houses, places where people live and love without being watched. And Al Pacino, alone in his expensive car heading toward his empty apartment, understands that he chose fame over love, recognition over happiness, and that some distances can never be closed. His building appears, the doorman ready, professional and discreet. Courtesy designed to protect him while keeping him apart. As he walks toward the elevator, Al Pacino knows the house he left behind still holds real life and real love. He can only observe it from a distance now, forever outside the ordinary happiness he sacrificed for a fame that gave him everything except the ability to truly belong. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with your thoughts on the video. I always enjoy reading your feedback.